There are times in this hobby where you're getting a lot of good trains and you are enjoying yourself catching said trains. However, on the other side of the same coin, there are also times where you feel very burned out and maybe consider asking questions about the hobby that you wouldn't have otherwise when you, for whatever reason, can't hit the broadside of the barn. The month of November entering into the more colder times of the year was a prime example of the latter. This particular time was not the best time personally for me to be out trackside with the way that it played out, even with the bright moments that were able to show up here and there. With that anecdote out of the way, kick your shoes off and relax, grab some popcorn, some snackies, and a drink of your choice, and let's see what we got. Our story begins on a very cold November 6th, 2025. Passing my way through Linworth on my way to the Model Railroad Club, I went across the Route 161 railroad crossing and noticed a triangle of headlights of a train approaching on the Columbus subdivision. Figuring I still have some time before I would have to be at the Model Railroad Club, I pulled off for the catch. Struggling on its northbound journey up the hill out of Columbus was a massive CSX L456, bringing local mixed freight commerce from Parsons Yard in Columbus, Ohio, all the way up to Walbridge, Ohio, with a single ES40 DC on the head end, with the throttle cranked all the way up to make it out of Columbus. After watching the virtual Railfan camera in Fostoria earlier in the morning of November 7th, 2025, I would find myself at the Wilson Bridge Road Railroad crossing in Worthington, Ohio, alongside Norfolk Southern Sandusky District and CSX's BERT line. Less than 5 minutes after my arrival, a southbound intermodal would grace the Sandusky District, that being Norfolk Southern 272 on its daily journey between Chicago, Illinois and Norfolk, Virginia, with its mix of domestic and international shippers. With the cold temperatures and light rain persisting, another southbound would be in line next on the Sandusky district. This one in particular being a mixed freight train, which I unfortunately cannot determine the train symbol. Despite that, some of the freight cars on this mixed freight train still carry the names of their fallen flag railroads, like C&W, Conrail, and even the Mid-South Railway, just to name a few. The last train I would see on this day would turn out to be the one that brought me out here in the first place. Sadly though, seeing this on the virtual Railfan camera and then later seeing it in person is basically the difference between night and day, and you're about to hear it here in just a second. Southbound Intermodal 28N would be flying its way through Worthington on its daily journey between Chicago, Illinois, and Charlotte, North Carolina. In charge of 28N today was Norfolk Southern SD70 Ace 1086, equipped with a Leslie RS3L air horn. Hearing it on the virtual Railfan camera, it was relatively okay, all things considered, but after hearing it in person, it was quickly made clear to me that the RS3L was too far gone and desperately needs to be replaced. Also, unfortunately, I can't turn the clock back, so here we are. The day's Railfan buzz on November 16, 2025 would bring me after work to the Park Road Railroad crossing in Westerville, Ohio. The day's Railfan buzz centered around Norfolk Southern's office car special being in town, being pulled by the first two members of Norfolk Southern's new Landmark series. A northbound empty ethanol train would grace the Sandusky district less than 5 minutes after I arrived, which I have reason to believe is 65D, on an as-needed run out of Selma, North Carolina, back to the interchange in Chicago, Illinois, with a pair of AC slop GEs in the lead. power on this ethanol train, don't you? About an hour later, after the sun went down, a triangle of southbound headlights would be made visible. What was thought to be foreign power on the Sandusky district actually turned out to be a southbound on CSX's BERT line. This mystery southbound on the BERT line would be revealed to be a grain train, specifically CSX GO17 on an as-needed journey out of Crestline, Ohio, bound for Parsons Yard in Columbus, Ohio. With the night hours continuing to drag on, and clear indication that the Norfolk Southern Office Car Special had no intention on moving from its current stop position anytime soon, one more southbound would grace the Sandusky district before I had to leave. With its load of domestic and international shippers, this southbound intermodal train would be revealed to be NS-276 on its daily journey between Chicago, Illinois and Charlotte, North Carolina. Despite the subpar performances on both Class 1s continuing on to this point, I was actually able to enjoy myself on this day, albeit if it was only for a very short period of time. I'm not a big fan of catching trains at night, but here we are several days later on November 19th, 2025. The nightly railfan buzz that brought me out so late today to the Route 161 railroad crossing was CSX local freight L340, which was profiled to run up the Columbus subdivision tonight with CSX 4720, the employee appreciation locomotive in charge. Shortly after I arrived, one of the signals lit up for a southbound train, specifically a loaded grain train that I unfortunately did not get the symbol of. With a singular rock hopper in tow, and a good friend of mine in the conductor's seat tonight, CSX local freight L340 screams his way through Linworth on his way from Columbus, Ohio to Willard, Ohio. Some deja vu would strike several days later on November 21st, 2025. This time on the Scottslong Secondary. Coming to a very brief stop just short of the abandoned Heritage Co-op grain elevator in Kyleville, Ohio, is CSX local freight L332, on its weekly round trip between Marysville, Ohio and Columbus, Ohio, with a very familiar face in charge today, which came in the form of CSX 4720, the Employee Appreciation SD70 Mac. Several days later, on November 25th, 2025, I would find myself outside the Central Ohio Model Railroad Club. I was here today to assist in the preparations for the holiday open house this year. When I found a place to stop, I would end up catching southbound mixed freight train 171 going down the Sandusky district on its daily journey between Conway, Pennsylvania and Chattanooga, Tennessee. I initially wasn't going to include these in the video, but considering how it's about to play out, I decided why not. Meat was in store tonight on the Sandusky district as 171 was making its way south. Northbound mixed freight train 11E would make its way through at the same time on its journey between Crewe, Virginia in Roanoke, Indiana, with its mixed freight and automotive commerce. The following day, on the 26th, a text message from a friend of mine would bring me back to the Heritage Co-op grain elevator in Kyleville, Ohio, on CSX's Scotts-Long Secondary. Preparing to take the siding here in Kyleville to meet another train is CSX Mixed Freight M246 on its daily journey between Columbus, Ohio and Gibson, Indiana, with its mixture of Kansas City Southern and Canadian Pacific foreign power today. As you're seeing here, the footage of M246 was sped up about 200% in order to save some time, and also to drown out most of the wind noise in the video. As you can probably tell, it was super windy on this day. As it would turn out, M246 would be too big to fit in the siding here in Kyleville today. That being said, M246's crew would have to end up using both the east and west end switches to fully get around local freight L332, which was also running around the same time. Once they did so, and the switch at the east end was reset, L332 was turned loose to continue its weekly round trip between Marysville, Ohio and Columbus, Ohio. There you have it, folks. This is where we now conclude yet another video. As stated near the beginning, it was pretty difficult for me to enjoy myself trackside this particular month. It took quite some time for things to start picking up, but when they did start to pick up, I was able to enjoy myself a little bit more, and the effects of Railfan Burnout weren't as strong as they were towards the beginning of the month. But sometimes there are periods where burnout is definitely possible in this hobby. If you enjoyed this video, consider checking out some other ones of mine. Leave a like or a comment down below to share your thoughts. Subscribe if you're new, and tap the notifications bell if you want to be notified when a new video gets posted here on the channel, just like this. Until next time, this is All Ohio Railfan, signing off.